Good afternoon or good evening to those of you watching us today. It's our pleasure to be with you again. This is another program in the series called Conversations with Clergy. If you've watched us before, you remember that I usually introduce this by reminding all of us that there are what are called social institutions. The things about which we gather ourselves to meet our human needs. And among those are economics, politics, education, family, and religion. And we usually get a pretty good fill of economics these days, and certainly politics these days, and quite a bit of education, some conversation about family, but less often about religion and the important role that it plays in our culture and in helping people to meet their basic human needs. I like to remind all of us, myself included also, that of all those social institutions, the one that is available to people in every known culture is some form of religion. And so religion plays an important part in the daily lives of people on this small planet, and we're hoping to help enhance your understanding and enthusiasm for the role it plays in your life and mine too. A part of that is to talk about people who are leaders in the religious sphere of our life, especially those here in St. Croix Valley. And I'm delighted today to introduce to you a fairly new clergy in the city of Hudson at the First Presbyterian Church. Her name is Dr. Kendra Grams. She comes from Nebraska. We'll have to ask her what she thinks about the Nebraska football team shortly. Although she graduated from a college in Iowa, well, I'll let her introduce herself a little bit and tell you the story. So we're delighted to have you here today, Dr. Grams.
Thanks
Delighted to have you in the community and at First Presbyterian Church. But has it been a handicap growing up in Nebraska?
No, I don't think so. Yeah, so I did. I grew up in South Central Nebraska and then went to college in Iowa. From there, I kept moving east. I went to seminary in Chicago. And from there, jumped out to the Washington, D.C. area and the suburbs out there, worked out there for a number of years. But as my husband and I continued to grow in life and our family continued to grow, we really felt the call back to the Midwest. So if anything, being in Hudson and in the Midwest has just been a deep blessing to kind of come back to our roots and what definitely feels like a slower pace of life where people are just more and more ready to engage and go deeper and explore how we can grow as communities, as people, and as people of faith specifically.
Let me back up a little bit on your conversation. You went to the seminary in Chicago. Which seminary is that?
I attended McCormick Theological Seminary. It's located in Hyde Park neighborhood of Chicago, where there are actually a number of seminaries. I think it was once said that outside of the Vatican, there are more religious scholars in Hyde Park, the Hyde Park neighborhood of Chicago, than anywhere else. So a rich place to study faith and theology and biblical studies, and I really appreciated that. And it was vastly different than my upbringing in South Central Nebraska, so it was a great exposure to various cultures, various people, various people from various walks of life, racial, ethnic backgrounds, and so forth. And that made the experience all the more rich as I was seeking to grow in my capacities to hopefully lead faith communities.
Is McCormick a Presbyterian seminary?
It is. It is Presbyterian affiliated. At the time I was attending, I think about half the student body was Presbyterian. The other half was kind of a widely diverse swath of Christian denominations and so forth.
What other seminaries in the area are sort of connected with McCormick, if any? Can you cross-breed programs?
Yes, so that's one of the advantages of going there is there's a consortium in kind of the whole Chicago metropolitan area, not just of, I think there's maybe 5 or 6 schools. I'd have to refresh my memory in the Hyde Park neighborhood there near the University of Chicago. But yes, they allowed cross registration. So there's a Lutheran seminary there, there's a Catholic seminary, a Unitarian Universalist seminary right there in the neighborhood as well. The Divinity School at the University of Chicago was another opportunity for cross-registration. So in addition to the wonderful diversity amongst my colleagues within McCormick, there were also opportunities. There's a congregational seminary as well there. That was the other one I was trying to think of. So I greatly enjoyed that, and it made the experience all the richer, I think.
So a lot of people don't realize, I think, how long it takes to become an ordained clergy, at least in what are typically called the mainline churches. So you had 4 years of college. You didn't mention the college. You went to Coe College in Iowa.
I did. I went to Coe College.
Which is a good college.
Yes, it was great.
And how many years of seminary did it take?
So in the Presbyterian Church and many mainline denominations, they require what's called a Master's of Divinity, and that's a 3-year master's degree if you go full-time, and which I did, so I got it done in 3 years. I like to say I learned a lot, and I would take nothing away from it, and I didn't want to stay longer and, have a 5 or 6 year master's degree. But there were certainly many things that once I got out into the church working full-time in ministry, I was like, oh, I wish I'd learned that in seminary, or I wish I'd learned that in seminary. But as we know from young children, experience is sometimes the best teacher. So I was also just fortunate in my first several years, and even till now, to have good colleagues to help me continue to learn how to nurture people and help communities of faith really become who God is calling them to be.
So once you graduated from the seminary, how did you end up in Washington, D.C. area?
Yes, well, so that's more of a personal story. So my husband is very interested in international affairs and Latin American specifically. So while we were in Chicago, he was teaching Spanish in the Chicago Public Schools, but was really feeling a call at that time to, at least for a few years, work more in international affairs with international nonprofits and so forth. And the largest job market for those sorts of jobs is the Washington, D.C. area. So we moved out there so he could get another master's degree, and specifically in Latin American studies. And he worked for a number of years in various nonprofits focused on building international bridges, and really enjoyed that. But as I said, as our family continued to grow, we really felt the call back to the Midwest, and really realized how deeply Midwest we are and how much we value the very community base here, the smaller town feel, and certainly the slower pace of life.
So when and where did you meet him? You were married in the seminary?
No, we met at Coe College. So
at Coe,
we're college sweethearts. So Coe gave us both many things, but I think we'd both say that was the greatest blessing is the partnership we found. So yeah, so we've been blessed to kind of journey together for a good number of years now and grow together.
It's wonderful. And your children?
Yeah, so I have 2 small children. My son is 3.5 and my daughter is 18 months. So they keep us very busy. They help us grow in so many ways, from patience to joy to just seeing the world anew through their eyes, and their curiosity is a blessing every day. Tiring, but a blessing.
Indeed. So I don't know how the process in the Presbyterian Church works. How did this parish in Hudson find out about you in D.C.?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in the Presbyterian tradition, we put great emphasis on discerning from the local church upward. So we don't have bishops or anyone saying, this pastor needs to go here, or you have to have this pastor. It's very much, we like to use the language discerning, listening for God's voice in terms of who is being called to which congregation. So that's done on both sides, from the pastor's side and from the church's side. So the church, when they're in search of a new pastor, forms what's called a pastor nominating committee that kind of on behalf of the congregation does hard work of looking at resumes. We have a kind of a standard extensive resume format that pastors fill out, which is basic demographics, but also answering some questions about your style of ministry, your hopes for the church broadly, how you would lead, those things. So committees do that on behalf of the wider congregation and enter into conversation, and then nominate someone and present someone to the congregation to say, we believe that God is at work in this relationship, and that this is the person God wants to be with us for the next chapter of our life together. And so I discerned that as I talked with that committee, that all that they were telling me about the congregation, their history, and their hopes for the future, that yes, this was definitely a place where I could bring the gifts God has given me to help lead them into the next chapter as we seek to share God's love with one another and with the wider community and wider world.
So to back up just a bit,
Yes.
when you got to D.C., your husband was, where did he get his master's degree, by the way?
So he got his master's at George Washington University.
Good school.
Yes, it was a rich program, and he had lots of great opportunities through that program, both experiential learning and just great colleagues in the classroom.
And was it at the same time you started your DMin program then?
Yes. Oh, I forgot to mention my doctorate of ministry. Now, the doctorate of ministry came a little later, and that was a program I did while living in the D.C. area. I went to Wesley Theological Seminary, which is a Methodist-affiliated seminary, so it was another great opportunity to hear from diverse voices that I don't get to hear from in Presbyterian circles. And that was a program I did probably 2 or 3 years after my husband finished his graduate program. We like to trade graduate programs, so I hope we are done now. And it focused on church leadership excellence was the official title of the program, and really just focused on taking the best of what we know from church contexts about leadership and the best of what we know from the wider world, from business leadership and corporate leadership to nonprofit leadership to political and humanitarian leadership, and bringing those all into dialogue of, again, how can we lead communities to be who God is calling them to be. So that was a rich program that I completed shortly before moving to Hudson. I was able to attend my commencement in May and move a matter of weeks later.
How long was the program? How many years did it take you to do that?
The program itself is designed to be completed, again, if you go full-time, in about 3 years. It took me about 4, but I considered that a victory since we also welcomed our 2 children into the world during that time. So I was blessed to have a lot of support that made that possible. The school was great in terms of flexibility. Because when you're due in the middle of a scheduled class, well, you shouldn't take that class. So they gave me some flexible options to still stay on track to finish in fairly good order. And obviously my husband is a saint, supporting me through all of that. And the communities I've worked with have provided infinite support, encouraging me every step of the way. So very grateful.
So you talked a little bit about the gifts you have. You've been here 3 months, 4 months, 5 months?
3.
Let's see, how?
Started in June and we're in September.
Yeah, June,
4?
July, August, about 4. So what gifts that you think you possess seem in after 4 months to be God working through you to bring you to this congregation so that those gifts could be especially applied among this wonderful group of people who make up that parish?
Yes. So some of the things that I think have been really important, at least so far, and these are gifts that I think some of which I was given, but also people have helped nurture in me over time. But the ability to see the big picture as well as the details, to be able to kind of attend to the implementation of wider visions, but also to be able to step back and see the wider visions and help ask the good questions to draw that out of people. And that discipline that I think I bring to the pastoral self of trying to ask the questions, not to be the one with all the answers, because I think that would be hubris. But
Hang on a second. What does the word hubris mean for our visitors?
That would be perhaps too bold, and I would be thinking too highly of myself. Let's put it that way. If I thought I had all the answers, I would be way too big for my britches, is another way to say it.
Okay.
Indeed. So just honing that gift of asking good questions and inviting people, because at core, I believe that we're all created in the image of God, and we all have something wonderful and divine and great gifts to give. And so I think people often have within them great answers, even if the challenges seem so monumental. If we can hone the discipline of listening to one another and bringing our perspectives together, we can find good solutions and places that we can do so much good and support all that God wants in the world. And I see that here too. I mean, it was true where I was serving previously, but absolutely here true, especially in this current context in which we find ourselves. There are many problems in the world, but I've just thus far experienced Hudson and First Presbyterian in particular to be a place of wonderful people with great ideas and great hearts. And so it's asking those questions of how we can work together to find good solutions that are in keeping with God's desires for the world.
Good. Is this the first parish where you are the sole pastor?
Yes. So it was the congregation I was serving most recently in the suburbs of Washington, D.C. We had 2 pastors on staff, which brought with it many blessings. It was probably double the size of the parish here. Had more pastoral care needs and more programmatic needs, but it was great to continue to learn in that context. But part of the reason I was interested in the Hudson Church is, as I've continued to grow and learn through experience, was really looking for the opportunity, feeling called to the opportunity to help lead an entire congregation and every aspect, from worship leadership on a weekly basis to taking the lead on all pastoral care, not just some, and helping them explore truly where God is calling them and where they are being called to grow and serve in new ways and continue their faithful ministry for over 150 plus years. So,
yeah, I was going to mention that parish has great historical roots in this community. Is considered to be one of the sort of the anchor churches in the community. Yet, like most denominations, it's been struggling to maintain membership, maintain a face in the society around us. So in the first 5 years that you're here, what kind of things are you thinking about that would encourage increased interest in your parish, increased growth in the parish, increased enthusiasm on the part of members in the parish to be engaged in the community, things like that?
well, I think at core is helping people tell their story. As I said, the people I've met thus far in our congregation are very deeply faithful people. Extremely so, extremely caring, extremely giving. What is a challenge, more widely, I think not just there, but I've experienced this elsewhere, is putting language around why they are so passionate about being part of this family of faith, why it's been so meaningful to them for so long, why they continue to do it when so many in our culture, it's not as high a priority. Clearly, if you're there, even every other week or whenever you're in town, that's an important thing. So helping people, again, back to the questions, asking the questions that help them reflect more deeply on why is this so important to me, to us? Why do we find meaning here? How does this help us navigate daily life in intentional ways that we think support goodness and love that God desires for the world? And then feeling comfortable to share that story, because people talk about not wanting to offend. So helping them have stories that they can speak from personal experience. And it doesn't feel like they're telling somebody else that this is the way, this works for everyone, but this is what has been meaningful to me. This is how I am growing by being part of this community of faith, by continuing to explore my Christian faith, and this is how it guides my daily life. Just telling those stories, I think, is so critical, and if we can start there, it opens up new stories, it opens up new connections for working together when we hear one another's stories. And I think it makes it so much more meaningful and effective to invite others along on the journey. If we can be honest and open about our personal stories, it invites people to bring their honest and open selves as well and to explore and grow with us. So those are some of my hopes, just at least initially. I'm still learning lots of stories, so I'm not quite sure what further actions it will lead to, but I certainly hope it leads to renewed interest in some of the great things the congregation is already doing, and also to exploring new avenues for how we can be faithful individually and collectively in the community and the wider world.
So do you ever reflect on the fact that you have 11 years of post-secondary education and you've given your life to that purpose?
Do I reflect on it? Sometimes it just makes me laugh. It's still, even when people call me Reverend Grams, that's still a little like, huh? It's really weird when I get called Dr. Grams, to be frankly with you. And that's not to diminish any of, advanced education. I think education is so critical. It's more to say that for me, there just always opportunities for learning, and that's more what it's about to me. So do I think I'm done learning? Absolutely not. Am I done paying lots of money for formal education? I hope so. So, looking to wider experiences and learning in various ways, whether it's formally or informally, I hope I continue to hone that, because I think that's how we continue to grow, and I think we're certainly called to that, and the world continues to change. So if we don't continue to learn and explore and reflect, then we're going to run into some problems, I think. So that's probably just another orientation to life that I have, is to truly take to heart being a lifelong learner.
Yeah. I was reflecting on when I was about your age, we moved from the Chicago area to Nebraska. And I remembered the length of time it took for us to slow down a bit, be a little more patient with processes and people, and a little less critical. What have been your biggest challenges moving from Washington, D.C. to Hudson?
I'm laughing because kind of that exact thing. Yeah, and I even told myself that, because we did so want the more relaxed pace, that I was like, probably the biggest challenge, I told myself this, is you're going to have to ratchet down. And it's been true. I've been catching myself, and I tend to be my own worst critic too. So, I've been feeling behind as I've tried to get to know the community, get to know the congregation, do some, both the weekly work of being a pastor, meeting with people and being present in their joys and their challenges and leading worship and doing long-term planning. I tend to put all these things and then be like, oh, I'm missing this or I'm missing that. And people have been just so deeply generous. No one's been demanding of me. They've been so supportive and welcoming and asking of, how can we support you? How's it going? And every time that happens, it's that reminder to me to just breathe, to be present in these gifts that God is giving, and to relax. It's also, I apologize to anyone who has noticed my driving. That is also an adjustment. After nearly 10 years driving in DC traffic, I am having to relearn to be slightly more courteous on the roads and less aggressive, as was the norm in driving in that area. So that's maybe the more humorous side, but it's been those disciplines of, just breathing and exhaling and embracing it all as a gift.
What is your spouse doing now?
So he has returned to teaching. He's teaching Spanish. He's teaching this year at Fridley High School, just north of Minneapolis. So far, I think that's going well. That is a diverse community, I've come to understand, and so that's a new challenge as well, to get to know that community for him as well, and hopefully the kids and I will get to do that as well at sporting events there, just as we seek to get to know this community more.
What are some of the challenges of a two-profession family with young kids, sometimes the unexpected demands of a parish pastor's life? How would you describe it? How do you approach it? Just whatever, just for people around. To me, it seems like it's just going to be hard to manage sometimes.
Well, as every life situation brings challenges, it does bring challenges. But I think we try to approach it with the same grace I encourage all families to approach life with balance, with clear communication, with the realization that no family can do everything. And so being intentional about our time, keeping a good family calendar. Just today, my husband and I were pinging back each other with one another, like, oh, well, they'd like me to do this. Does that conflict with meeting schedules? So, and just being very intentional about always communicating with each other. That's been super important. Trying to find really critical time for each of us to have with the kids, time for us together. So it's a daily discipline. Like, there's no secrets, but just a lot of good communication and being intentional. I try to say we try to be where we are when we're there, which can be difficult, especially in our highly connected age. We've had to try to train ourselves to put our cell phones off to the side, especially when with our kids, and but people embrace it, and by and large, the parish is great. I try to protect, pick up and drop offs from daycare with my kids so that they have those times every day, and so people have been willing to slide some meetings, a little bit later, so that I can tuck my kids in and then go back to work.
Yes.
But you just adapt, I think.
And do it.
And, try to seek balance. And if you're feeling off kilter, that's always a good time to be like, okay, what's out of balance? And where do we need to focus a little bit more? What do we need to let go of?
What do you do for fun?
Right now, it's still, right now it's a lot of yard work, which probably doesn't sound like fun to a lot of other people, but we moved when we were living out on the coast. We were in a 2-bedroom apartment, and so this new adventure of having a whole house and a yard to go dig in the dirt, it's just fun to dig in the dirt with my son. Good. A lot of days. So we're living into that and just enjoying having a little bit more space as a family.
That's wonderful.
Which is fun.
Well, I have invaded your space for about 30 minutes. I'm wondering if there is any question I should have asked and didn't ask.
That's an excellent question. I doubt it, but I would probably be remiss if I didn't just use the opportunity to make sure the wider community knows that we welcome all, and I hope that, if you're looking for a place to grow in faith and ask deep questions and explore how we can work together for God's purposes of love and justice and goodness, then, we hope people will come and worship at First Presbyterian or serve with us however they feel called.
What time is your worship on Sunday mornings?
So we worship on Sunday mornings at 9:30 a.m. and have various other opportunities to serve in the community, to fellowship with one another, to go deeper through scripture studies, book studies, and so forth. So people can give me a call anytime, and I'd be happy to share more.
Only parish in town with a labyrinth?
That's true, yes. We have, I was reminding the congregation that they do a good job of embodying the importance of both reflection and action by their very property, because we have both a labyrinth and a garden that they call the Give It Away Garden that grows produce for the food shelf in Hudson and also for the Women, Infant, and Children program of Wisconsin. So that's probably a great embodiment of the balance that we try to seek of both reflecting on God's presence and God's guidance and then working for justice and love and peace in the world.
And worship style is kind of a blend of traditional and contemporary.
Yes.
Great pipe organ, but also great ensemble, great choir, fantastic preaching, wonderful people. Anything else?
Yeah, no, that's probably a good summary. I mean, it's one of our values that we, if I can remember the exact phrase, we value creativity, diversity, and balance in worship and the arts. And so we try to do that, understanding that everybody kind of connects with God in a different way. And so to be welcoming, we want that diversity and balance.
Well, thank you so much for giving this time to share with us and the wider community. Our pleasure. We wish you every blessing at your time here.
Thank you.
And we'll look forward to another conversation down the line someplace.
I will look forward to it.
Thank you so much. And thank you for joining us again. Bye now.